Tens of thousands of people in Myanmar are protesting against last week's coup and are demanding the release of elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, South Africa's former cabinet minister, Meyer, says what is currently happening in Myanmar is being made worse because international sanctions against the country were lifted. Now, Meyer runs a peace project in Myanmar and was the international advisor to President Aung San Suu Kyi. Now, he believes that the country could face 2 decades of military dictatorship if the global community does not act quickly enough. For more on this, Meyer joins us now via our video line. Rolf, thanks for your time and welcome to the program. For people who aren't necessarily focusing on the story, what would you say is at stake here for an international community?
Yeah, maybe thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the invitation to participate. I think it's important just to give a little bit of context. Myanmar was under military regime for a number of decades, up to 2010, more or less 2011. And then first steps were taken to democratize the country, to change the constitution and to allow the opposition led by Aung San Suu Kyi to participate in politics. And in the first by-elections, she in fact participated, I think it was around about 2013. And she became effectively then the leader of the opposition. The international community was by then very happy about the progress and the start of the process of democratization and lifted sanctions that was held against the military regime for a very long time. But I think that was unfortunately too early. And I've always advocated that the sanctions should have stayed until the full path of democratization had taken place and the new constitution was introduced, which never happened. So Aung San Suu Kyi was elected as leader of the opposition, leader of government in 2015, and she took office in 2016 in that capacity. And she again ran for government last year in November, had an overwhelming success in the elections, and now the military has decided to grab back power, to exercise a coup, which they did last Monday early morning. And now we're probably back where it all started more than 10 years ago. And it's, to my mind, 10 years of lost time as far as the democratization process is concerned. So the point I'm making is that, unfortunately, I think the international community was too much in a rush to lift the sanctions, and thereafter they had no leverage against the military, which, by the way, kept power for at least 10 government departments, including defense, police, etc. And now they're fully back in power as a result of the coup.
Right.
And unless the international community support the people of Myanmar, it will have very bad effects and a long-term setback for the country.
Right. It certainly is a scandalous move, and at the heart of it, the military is essentially crying foul over the elections that you've just spoken about. On what basis are they saying that this election was actually fraudulent?
Well, there's no indication of why they are saying that. I think one can accept that they had the plan in place before the elections even took place, that the commander-in-chief wanted to become the president. They participated through their party structures in the election. And the indication is there that the plans toward this coup already started as early as August last year. The elections took place in November. And when the election result went the wrong way, then seemingly they tried to find reasons to indicate they should be exercising a national state of emergency, which they then did. But there's no proof. Nobody has laid any claims about election frauds that anybody took note of.
Given your experience in this field, what would you say is the end game for the military here? Because unlike the military takeover in places like Sudan, this military actually doesn't enjoy the support of the public. And it almost sounds completely unsustainable that they can exist in a context where there's the kind of tensions we're seeing literally playing themselves out in the streets of Myanmar.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, there's no doubt about it that Aung San Suu Kyi is a very, very popular amongst the people. She has been in the previous 2 elections. And I was there even at the time when I'm talking about 2019, when she was under pressure as a result of the ICJ, etc., etc. And people just overwhelming. They came to the streets to support her, and she's the hero. She's the national mother of the nation. So I can't see how the military is going to escape from this. And that's why I think it's important that the international community put pressure on the military to rethink. And if they don't, then obviously sanctions will be the next step, renewed sanctions, which undoubtedly will bring the country on its knees economically, because it's still a country that needs a lot of help from the outside.
Could there have been another political alternative taken by the military here? Help us place specifically the head of the military, who you've already mentioned, who, according to some reports, also has his own personal motives, because he's actually approaching a stage where he needs to retire. And obviously that's quite a bit of a tough pill for him to swallow at this stage.
According to all the indications that I have heard over the weekend and last week, is that he has the ambition to become president of the country. In other words, that he, through his party structures, the military has a political party that participates in parliament. They, by the way, have 25% enforced seats in parliament, the military. And he has the ambition, the commander-in-chief has the ambition to become president of the country. And probably part of this plan, which the coup is part of, is to actually rerun for elections, to hold elections under, very different circumstances, and to get the support of the people, which they will try to do, or to maneuver it in such a way that they can then be elected as president under this default constitution, the current one. And, the whole point is the process of complete democratization should have taken place, and the military should have taken the back seat as part of a civilian government. Instead, they want to be in the forefront, and like you indicated, I think the commander-in-chief has his ambitions and doesn't want to retire in June.
Right. You've worked very closely with Aung San Suu Kyi. In fact, the City Press reporting that you spoke to her as recently as March last year. Any idea of where her thinking is throughout all of this?
It's very difficult to say. Nobody has contact with her. I spoke with the special envoy of the Secretary General of the UN yesterday. And even she, the special envoy, had no contact with Aung San Suu Kyi during the last week, and is just not allowed to have contact with her. So it's very difficult to know where she even finds herself right now, what the situation is. And of course, the military has just said that she is under arrest, probably in her residence in Naypyidaw, the capital. But it's going to be very important, to see how this unfolds as far as she is concerned, because the people of Myanmar are going to the streets, like you indicated at the beginning, and I think those protests will just escalate during the coming days and weeks.
Let's talk about what the way forward then looks like. I mean, you're calling for more reaction from the international community, but we've already had the UK, the EU, Australia, the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, US President Joe Biden, and various other people with considerable influence on the global stage speaking out against this unequivocally so. What else can they do?
I think they can speak out more. I think there should be a collective action taken from the region itself, countries that are neighboring there, of course, China, Indonesia, Thailand, and so forth. And so I think it's important that the collective exercise being executed by the region, but also by the neighboring countries, otherwise in the region, Australia, etc. And then, like you say, the US administration probably is in the best position to plan for sanctions against the military regime. So I think together with the pressure on the international side, the people inside the country will feel enforced to go ahead with the protests, and hopefully making it just impossible for the military to run the country, to execute their strategy. If that can be done, I think it can be turned around. Otherwise, there is the potential for military rule for the next indefinite period.
Right. What is also taking place in the backdrop is the treatment of Rohingya people in Myanmar, the Rohingya minority. And, it certainly raised eyebrows, and that's just putting it lightly, really, on the international stage. How much of a disadvantage do you feel this could be to Aung San Suu Kyi ascending once again into power, considering that, several 100,000 Rohingya minority were actually pushed out of the country into Bangladesh because they're considered to be illegal migrants in Myanmar?
Yeah, that is a difficult situation that the civilian government under Aung San Suu Kyi didn't always dealt with in the best possible way. Of course, the main reason for the refugee situation is what the military did in 2016 and 2017, when they forced the people out, when they destroyed their villages in that particular part of Myanmar, in the Rakhine state. And the Rohingya were forced across the border into Bangladesh. So it was the military who was specifically behind that. How they can now claim that they will allow the people to come back, that itself will be very doubtful if they are in control. But once there is a restoration, hopefully, of a civilian government, that would have to be one of the priorities for the civilian government to deal with. But not only the Rohingya, other ethnic minorities as well. There are at least 15 other identifiable ethnic minorities around the country. And one of the parts of the democratization process was actually to construct a new constitution that will provide for a federal model that will allow these minorities around the country to gain constitutional protection by means of a federal arrangement. And there was progress in that regard, but all of that is now probably also on hold indefinitely. It could be if the military is in control.
Meyer, thanks very much for your time. Certainly a developing story that's sharply in our focus. Really appreciate your insight on this. Meyer is a former international advisor to Aung San Suu Kyi. Thanks very much indeed.